we'll get into dashboarding. So in order to do that, let me share my screen. I'm going to share this current screen, so just let me do this first. There we go. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Share screen. Share screen. This is share. And what we're going to do is go to Tableau Prep. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? So in Tableau Prep, I know that Rain did an excellent job last week of covering it, but I want to cover a little bit about your data, specifically the data that you are going to be working on. So what I need to do in order to do that is in Tableau Prep, I can go ahead and connect to data, right? But I want to explain a few things about connecting to data in Tableau Prep. Now, you probably aren't going to have any data on a server, but you are going to have data that is probably in a file-based form. The data that was provided to me by the NCAA was in a zip file. I had to unzip it. And when I unzipped it, I put it into a specific directory, that being, I'll just go to recent, one called NCAA. Okay. Documents thing, NCAA. And you'll see that I have here 3 files that provided by them. One is the data dictionary, which is in an Excel form. Now, if you recall, what I did was I'll go back and I'll do that again. I said connect to data. I said I wanted to connect to a text file. Text file means that it is not Excel. It is either going to be a CSV or a .txt file, right? So when I find an Excel file like this, it's not going to allow me to connect to it. I have to connect to the CSV files that are in this particular directory. The file that was provided by the NCAA, that is the one you're going to be working with most, is this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. Now, what you get when you open it is, as you see, you get to see all the files here and the information that's in it, and some sample of what the data looks like there, right? I can do things like change the separators if I need to. I can change columns and do other things. For the most part, this data is clean, so I don't have to do any changing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay. Now I can go ahead and look at this data. Okay. Hold on for 1 second. That's one of the joys of working from home is you have dogs that bark. Anyway, so I notice in this data there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. And this is what I want to cover with you regarding the things that you would probably want to fix. Rain covered some of how you would probably do that, but there's going to be a lot of other things that you will probably want to consider doing, right? So most of the information here, if I look at it as I go through, I see things like, okay, I see up here the number of records that I have. I have almost 210,000 rows. They're spread across 2 years, that being 2022 and 2023. I have a whole bunch of information that is customer ID. These are each of the individual customers that have interacted with the NCAA. This is where I start to see things going a little bit wonky in the data, in that you have question marks where there are 3 rows. See where it says 3 that are highlighted are just question marks. Notice how this one is large gray, right? That means that all of these records have an unknown. When I come down here and I look at customer city, I see all of these are unknown, right? When I was looking at question mark, I see down here, these are also unknown, but that's where the question mark is coming in. So basically I have customer information as far as their ID, but I have nothing about them except for their zip code, right? So we're going to focus a little bit on the zip code information a little bit, right? And then everything else is going to have actual street addresses in it. So if I wanted to get rid of the unknowns, I don't want to, I could say exclude, right? And I could also get rid of the question marks because they don't seem particularly helpful either, right? But when I do that, I go from almost 210,000 to 73,000 rows, which is a significant change in the amount of information that I have available to me regarding the customers, okay? So I'm going to actually get rid of those changes by just deleting them over here where it says I don't want them anymore, and they come back. I also could have hit Control Z, but I didn't want to do that. I needed to show you how you can kind of control the changes here. You'll also notice that you have some nulls around the actual state. You have a lot of, and you have some unknowns around the state. And then you start to see things in the actual state data that I would want to start to address, right? I don't know what the 19th and 14th states are, but I just think they're probably not right, okay? So these are ones that if I need the address, I probably am not going to be able to figure it out, okay? But I still have the customer information, so I'm going to keep it. Same thing with 19th. Now, with 19th, I do see some things that are interesting, right? Like, well, the zip code. That might tell me something, but I can't fix that. I go to A, again, not much. A, B. But now I start to get to things that I can fix, right? For example, Alberta. Alberta is not a state, it is a province in Canada. So this actually tells me something about your data in that when it says customer state, it really means customer state and or province, right? Because this is customers of the NCAA, and it could be international locations where they live. Also notice that they look a little bit different. That's because this A is a lowercase a. So I'm going to go in there and actually change that value to be an uppercase A. And that does something called a grouping. Now I only have one Alberta instead of two. You'll also see the same type of thing in British Columbia. You'll see that I have California, right? But I have CA upper and lower case. So one of the first things you're going to want to do in your data is probably go in and start fixing some of the state information. Then, you know, where you can. Like here you have Indiana, IN in lowercase, because that's going to merge and make your data more correct. All right. And you can do that simply by going through the flow and fixing the individual states, right? So ME is main, but you have to do it in uppercase. You'll see down here that you have some zip codes that look foreign. That's because this is actually a US zip code for the Virgin Island of St. Thomas, right? So you have to try and figure out what that should be. Lots of fixing that can be done here. Then you'll notice that you have a lot of unknown zip codes, right? But you also have a lot of places where you might have things like city that are actually just kind of missing or unknown, right? If you have an unknown, if you have an unknown city, right? But you have a known zip code. So there's about 1,000 or more places where you have a zip code, but you don't have a city. There's a good chance that you might be able to fix it where the zip code is correct. So this is one of the things that Tableau Prep is great at. I can go ahead and say, you know what, I want to get data from somewhere else. In this case, I'm going to go to the United States Post Office and say, give me a zip code file. Download it. And you can just go to the US Post Office and Google zip code download, and this is the file that you will get. And what you'll see is that I now have all of the zip codes for the United States, okay? And what you also have here is probably a better representation of the physical state. The zip code is also it's all going to be in the correct case, so that rather than going in and doing the fixings of each state, you can simply join this file to this file, doing a simple join, right? On zip code, right? The way to do that, I'm going to add a join here. So I need the customer zip code here and the physical zip code here. And what you'll notice is that I now have, for each customer, in the second half of the data that I have joined together here, I have the region. I have more information about the customer. I have the region that they're in. I have a district that they're in. I have the possible address of them, not the number, but the street that they're on. I have the city all in uppercase. I have the state all in the correct case. Notice how many of these states I have. So I have better information, right? Simply by joining this. And I can probably go in now to a clean step. And in the clean step, I can start doing things like saying, you know what? I don't really need customer state any longer, right? Because at least in this file, customer state is something that I need to fix, right? So I can just get rid of that. I can get rid of things like customer city too, because there are multiple different cases that they show up. This way, Abilene will always show up as one city instead of two. This is one way of fixing the data. The other thing that you might want to consider doing in this data as you go along, as you clean it up, is start looking at the data that's actually provided to you and start creating information that's relevant to the analysis that you're trying to do. For example, I have a customer first reference field and I have a customer first purchase field. So I can easily create a field that is a calculation between these two that is simply show me the difference from the day that they first contacted us to the date that they first purchased. How do I do that? I could use a function called dateDiff. And if you look here, you'll see I want to see month. In this case, I'd want to see days, right? And between one date and another. So this is going to be, I want to use dateDiff. And I'm going to put in day, comma. And the other field that I want to use is going to be customer first purchase date. This is a valid calculation from contact to purchase. Time. And that gives me a field that is a calculation. Probably down here at the end. There we go. That gives me a number that is the thing. There you go. Oh, wow. A lot of people seem to have purchased on the same day that they first contacted. So that's an interesting statistic. There are a number who are, between, they've waited a long time. So this is an example of an interesting calculation from the data that is not provided automatically, but you can easily go and calculate, all right? So Tableau Prep gives you a lot of capability as far as what you can do with the data, and you can really look at the data and create new things or add extra information. Now, I went and got the United States zip code file. You might also want to go out and get the Canadian zip code file. Now, I don't know, because when I was looking at this data, as you saw, some of the folks are, well, from places that might be hard to try and find because they're, either European or they're in, different countries, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the one thing that I would say is if you do find customers that are in locations that are outside of the United States, one of the things you might want to do is add a field for country that's missing here. And you'd want to go in and try and calculate which country that you're in so that you can use the correct zip codes. I'm not going to go through all of this because you're going to be doing this as part of your exercise, but I'm just giving you ideas on things that you'd be able to do to make this data more relevant and tell a bigger, broader story for what you're trying to do in your visualizations. Okay, I'm going to pause there, see if anybody has any questions. If not, then I'm going to move on to the next part of this exercise, which is I need to go in and start talking about Tableau desktop, and particularly Tableau, using it for making dashboards. Okay, so far, most of what we have been doing with Tableau has been things along this line, right? Where we're creating visual representations of our data, right? And it's great at doing that. That's what you will be doing for the most part in your building of a dashboard, right? But the worksheet, which is what this is called, is just a small component of all the things that you can do in Tableau to do more as far as making the information more able to be used for analysis. Okay, so I have a couple of worksheets. I have this map, I have a table, I have a timeline. Doesn't really matter what the visualizations are showing. What I'm going to do is show you how to use those work sheets in a dashboard, in building a dashboard. So the way that you do that is you'll notice down here on the bottom, right? Actually, let me get rid of this because you have the material that you've created, and then you have the ability to do more, right? I can create a new worksheet, or I can create a new dashboard, or I can create what's known as a new story. I'm not going to focus too much on stories here, but if you want to, there's plenty of videos on how to use stories. In some cases, stories help you to more present your information in almost a lecture format, so they can kind of go through like components. I prefer dashboards, but the way they work is kind of simple. So let's go ahead and go to the dashboard because it's a little bit more complex to use a dashboard. So I wanted to make sure that you know how. All right, so when I come here, the first thing I have is the ability to drop sheets. Now, these are the sheets that I created, so I could easily just go here and say, all right, I'm going to drop this one here. I don't really want to do that because, well, I want to go over some of this UI and how you use it and how that will be relevant to what you're trying to do. So let's start off with up here, okay? If I were trying to show this on a phone, my visualization would be much more different than it would be if I were showing it on a screen, right? So I can choose the different types of devices that I want this to be shown on by using this toggle, right? And I can even go up here and change the different types from a phone, the default, to a desktop, to a tablet, back to a phone, et cetera, right? And I can choose the model. So I can kind of create visualizations based on what I am going to be presenting on, right? In what you're doing, I don't think you're going to need to worry about that, but it's good to know that you can do that, right? I'm going to change this back to default, right? The other thing that I can do is change my size of what I am going to work on, right? So by default, it comes to a desktop browser, and you can see here that I have a fairly good amount of choices here that I can go through, right? Generic desktop is a little bit bigger. If I was thinking more along of full screen, it's a different layout. I tend to like going with generic desktop, but it really depends upon what you're going to be presenting on, right? So you can go ahead and change that, and you can also go in and change the actual size based on your screen. Okay, now I have here is basically a blank sheet. I don't tend to want to start with a blank sheet. What I want to do is start with something that will allow me to control the spaces that I want to have on my blank sheet. Think of them almost as if you're used to using something like Photoshop. I want to set up some layering here. The layering being the spaces that I want to work in. Over here under objects, I have a whole bunch of different objects. A horizontal container and a vertical container, text, extensions, etc., etc. Right? And if I scroll down, there are actually some more. Right? Okay. What I want to do first is start to containerize things. Right? The way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to go ahead and put a horizontal container. Now, I could have also said vertical container. I think the difference really doesn't matter that much at this point because it's basically taking up all of the space, right? But once I've done that, okay, I want to start thinking about what I want to show on my dashboard. So I'm going to put a horizontal container here. If I put the horizontal container here, see how it takes up all the space? But if I go a little bit over to one side, it only takes up half that space. So I want that. I only want half that space. And I'm going to take another horizontal container and put it over here. So now I have two spaces to work in, right? Well, I have three different sheets that I want to show, right? So what I might want to do is say, you know what? Horizontal container, that's where I'm going. But if I go and I now drop within this horizontal container up top, notice how it will either take half of that or both, or all of it, or, excuse me, that's what I'm trying to get to, both. I want it half. So I'm just going to drop that there. Same thing again. We go up and drop, whoop, drop another one over here, up top. So now I have four different containers, right? Now, why is that important? It's important because now I have four different places where I can put things and control the size of them, right? So what are the types of things that I might want to put inside of my container? Well, obviously I want to put my sheets in there, okay? But I might want to put other things. For example, I might want to start off with an image, right? I'm going to go ahead and choose an image. And look at that. I just so happen to have the NCAA logo. And I'm going to want to center it and fit it. Go ahead and say OK. So there it is down there. Oh, I put it in the wrong spot. I'm going to do that. It was in the wrong box. OK. Nope. What did I do? Got rid of one of my containers. OK. So I have four? Yeah. OK. So I want to put it here. I'm sorry. I keep on getting rid of it when I don't want to. There. There we go. Thank you. Then I want to drag this up here. That's where I want to put it. I'm going to fit it. Choose. OK. And then say OK. Now, you'll notice that I have a very, very big NCAA logo here. Now, I don't want it to be that big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller. All right. And I really don't want it to be that far over. So I'm going to drag this over now. Okay, so that's where I want my NCAA logo to go. But now you'll notice what happened, right? What happened is it changed the size of this, right? Okay. Now, I may not want it to have a size like that, okay? I might prefer it to be closer to this. Or that might actually be where I'm going to put something like text, okay? And that text is going to be something that's going to help me to explain what's going on my dashboard. So I'm not going to leave that or change that. I'm just going to put text in there. And I'm just going to say, something rather explanatory here, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and change the font a little bit because that's a little bit too normal, right? And let's make it 22 and center. Okay, there we go. So you get the idea. Now, so I can basically use these types of objects to control the size, and I can put in more vertical containers within here so that I can really kind of control things a lot. The other thing I can do is I can change it to floating, right? So if I change it to floating, this one becomes something that I can put right in here, right? And I can kind of move it around a little bit. Sorry. But I'm not going to do that for now. All right, so I want to put my map here. All right. Now you'll notice that what it did automatically for me is it put in some stuff, right? That stuff is my legends. I don't really need my legends to be in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put in another horizontal container, right? So here's my map again. And what I want to do is I'll put a vertical container in here. Again, right there. Okay, so now I have two. And I'll put my table there and my timeline here. Okay. Now again, I got the right. Look. Now, if I wanted to keep the legend, right, I got rid of them all. I might have wanted to keep the color legend, and I could probably put them somewhere over here. All right. That's entirely up to you. Now, I don't need to have the title, so I'm going to hide that. I'm going to hide that here, and I'm going to hide that here also. Okay, because I think they're kind of self-explanatory. All right, so one of the things that really is going to help people who are using any dashboard that you build when you're trying to help them analyze their data is once you have the information on the dashboard, you want to perhaps provide some interactivity between them, okay? And one of the ways that you can do that is by going here, right? And there are a couple of things that you can do. One is probably the easiest is to just say, I want to use this as a filter, okay? Or if you can either do it from the drop down, or you can just click on this thing that looks like a little funnel, right? And say use as filter. Now, what that does is it then turns this visualization, this map, into a filter that is applied to everything else on the dashboard, okay? So here I am, I notice that Texas is having a little bit of a problem, right? Their profits are down. When I click on Texas, notice what happens to the visualization. I get rid of all the other regions down here because Texas is only in the center. And again, the only region I see here is the central, and I get to see the sales in the central region for Texas only here in this particular visualization. Now, if I go up here and unclick or off on something else, it goes back to what it was before. Okay, so this is something called an action filter. right? And I can go in and say, you know what, I also want to use this as an action filter, for example, right? And I want to see west. And what I get now is all the west visualizations. Or I can choose the south and see all the south in the other graphs. Okay, you get the idea. This becomes something that allows me to drill into and see more of the information about what I am trying to highlight. Okay, so this gives me a lot of control over the visualization because it allows me to really make the visualization more interactive. It allows me to make it something that people who are getting this information, they might be part of a larger group, like if you're working with the NCAA, you have schools that are in each region, and they probably are more interested in specific geographic areas than others. So they'd be able to focus in on that and get more value out of the overall visualization that's painted for everything, right? So this is just an example of how using the dashboard to tell more is going to be very, very productive for what you're going to be doing in this context. Now, I want to get into a little bit more about what you can do, right? And what I mean by that is when I created this filter, I created something called a dashboard action. Now, if I go up here, right, and go to dashboard, you'll see here there is something called actions. This is the action that was created. It's actually two actions. I created one filter for the map and one filter for the table, right? So you see the source here is the map, this source is the table, right? And what I did was I said, okay, this is a filter, and what I want to do is when it's selected, I want to go ahead and on the source, filter everything else out, right? If I go and edit it, I can go and make changes like I can say, you know what, on the map, I don't want to have to select it. I want to hover over it. If I do that and say, okay, now as I go over each state, notice the difference. Now as I hover over a state, it basically then shows me each state's values. Okay. So now it's a different type of selection. And I have a lot of control within those dashboard actions that allows me to do pretty interesting things, right? For example, I'll go and edit that one again, right? And it allows me to bring up a menu, okay? The menu would be things like, oh, you might want to go to another, like to a URL or something that would allow you to, for that state, show you a website on the colleges in that state or things of that nature, okay? It also allows me to do things like, I'll go back to select. This is the source. You'll notice that it filters everything. Well, you know what? Maybe I don't want the timeline to be filtered. Now, if I say okay, notice that when I choose state, the timeline doesn't change. Okay? So I have a lot of fine control over what I can do within the dashboard to make the behavior something that will help drive the insight that I am trying to get to. Now, I'm going to go real slowly through how to get there again, just so that you understand, all right? So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and say, remove both of these. And when I remove them, now there's no interaction between these dashboards at all, okay? I'm going to go ahead and say use filter. This is where I say use filter, or I can use it here also. It's the same exact thing. Or I can go up to dashboards and I can go to actions and say add an action, right? I want to use a filter and it's going to bring up, okay, I want it to have to be the map as the source. I want it to select. I want it to be on all fields, okay? Keep filtered values. Okay. So basically, this is me creating it manually versus just clicking here. You can create it manually if you find that easier. I find it easier to just do that, and then I get the behavior that I want. So I'm going to go back up here to dashboards again and just remove that. And show you again that this is, when I go into any workbook or any, I shouldn't say workbook, any container and click on it, it brings up this menu. This menu is what allows me to do things like add the use filter. There are other things that I can do, right? So I can go to the sheet. What this does is it basically takes me to the sheet that created that, and I make changes here if I need to. Like I could have hidden the table there. I can change the fonts there and do other things, right? The other thing I can do is filter. I can fix the height, right? Now, what that means is if I go over here, right? No, what that means is it's fixing the height within this box. Now, there are a lot of other things that, as far as visual appeal is concerned, you can get into. Like the choice of color, you'll notice that all these colors are pretty much the same, except for this one, right? I did something wrong here. I should have had the region color reflect the colors that are being used on else, which are red, green, blue, right? I'd go in and change that so that they are the same. So I'm going to do that here. But for the most part, using color where if this is good green here, then the same green is good here. That's a relatively good practice to get into. In fact, because the NCAA has a certain color palette, it might be something that you would want to consider looking at the color palette that the NCAA uses and use that color palette for the entire dashboard, right? And what I mean by that is you might want to go in and start doing things like looking at the borders, looking at the colors, change the background color maybe to match this background color or whatever colors the NC, because that makes this more personal or more attractive to the people that are using it. Now, how are we doing on time there, Jessica? We're getting close to the end of our...
we're close to the end of the...
Okay, so I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions that I can answer. Have there been any questions in the chat or...
Yes, Rain has taken care of those. Thank you, Rain.
Thank you, Rain. Yes, and thank you for last week, Rain. Okay, then let's see. Is there anything else that I can cover here? Oh, yes, I should show you this, right? So one of the things that you will notice is that as I was going through, I was building containers, right? So these are the containers where they are enclosed, right? So that I can choose here which container I want to work on also. And I can move them or work with them to put them in other containers if that makes sense. So I have a little bit of control here also. But yeah, it also helps kind of know where they are, because one of the things that I can do within a container, and see if this one will work, right, is I can select the size of specific containers to be the same, right? So basically, if they are in a single container, I can say, choose all of these to be the same size, right? So if I have a container that's got a whole bunch of icons going across here, I could say, make all of these the same size, and that makes it a lot easier for me to, not have to worry about the sizing and such. Let me see if I can, I'll show you that real quick. I'm going to put a horizontal container down here, right? And then I'm going to put a vertical container, and then vertical container, vertical container, and a third vertical container, right? Now, when I go over here to layout, what you'll notice is I have this horizontal container, where I have these vertical containers, right? For some reason it dropped out of there. But what I should be able to do is distribute contents evenly. What that does is it makes them all the same size. And even if I were to add another one in there, so these three are the same size. So those three are all in the same layout, okay? And this one is outside of it. You see how that works? So that's a good way, or an easy way of, if you're trying to make everything kind of very symmetrical in a certain grouping, you can do that by using this containerization I'm going to remove that from the dashboard. So now I have those three. Oops, the wrong one. Anyway, you get the idea. Any other questions? Anything else that we need to cover? I hope this has given you some ideas around what you can do in the presentation of your data. There's a lot more that you can do, like the changing of the background color and other things that just make it kind of pop. But we can cover that in a future section. Okay?
Hey, John, I have a quick question, if you don't mind. Do you
Sure.
have any general guidance as to what is too much to put in a dashboard? Are there any general rules like, hey, we try not to put more than 4 graphs on one page or anything like that?
Wow. That is an excellent, excellent question. Okay. And I would have to say that there is nothing concrete, right? But you're absolutely right that you can put way too much. The idea of a busy dashboard is something that drives me crazy, right? Because if you have too much, then you are distracting from what you're trying to tell, right? General rule of thumb. General rule of thumb is the way the dashboards should be written is based on the way that people will most likely consume the information, right? So for example, like I just hid the date here, right? Well, why would I do that? Well, the reason I did that is because, well, the dates show up here, right? And having the date just kind of distracts from what I'm trying to tell. What I'm trying to tell is that sales are going up in different regions, right? So I don't even really need to have this either, okay? So the first thing that you want to do is think about, well, what am I trying to tell? And what information gives that in the shortest and easiest way, okay? Other things that you want to do or try to avoid are things like this, right? This isn't right. I can't see everything without scrolling. So I need to make sure that I don't need to scroll, right? And the reason I say that I need to make sure of that is because I want them to see all the information, and then I don't need them to scroll to see it, right? So there are a lot of things that aren't necessarily intuitive that, yes, too much is going to be more than what you want to do. You want to keep it to a minimum to tell what you're trying the person viewing the information to understand, right? The other thing is value your space, okay? Generally, people in the United States read from left to right, top to bottom. The most valuable space is right here, the upper right or upper left-hand corner, because that's where most people are going to start. Now, putting something like a logo here, you might say, well, that's not particularly valuable. But if you're trying to tell people that this is for the NCAA, you tell it very quickly with a logo, right? You might want to put instructions next to that if they're needed for what you're doing here. But then again, use the rest of the space very specifically with whatever data or whatever insight you're trying to provide should be right up here at top, okay? As far as too much, think of the better way to provide that information, right? I'll use this as an example. This is a basically a grid. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. Generally, it's not something that I would think is a good way of providing information, but it's different in that it's color-coded, right? And the person's eye instantly comes down to here because it's bright red and it's telling me something that they need to know. They would also see very easily that these are things that are doing really well because it's bright green. So by using color and kind of tone, you are giving more information in this small space. So much more that I could probably think that this one might be something I could make even smaller, right? And use this space a little less, because look at that. In this little tiny space, I see all the numbers and everything looks good. But if I go a little bit smaller, now I have nothing, right? Now I could fix that by changing the format of these numbers, right? The way I'd want to do that is, instead of showing these numbers as where is it? Oh, of course. I want the numbers to be, let's see, custom, and I want the display unit to be in thousands. And now, when I go back to my dashboard and I crunch it a little bit more, I still see all the numbers, okay? So right now, see what I did there? I can make it a little bit smaller. So the value is, or what you're trying to do is use the space as well as best you can and not make it too busy. In fact, one of the things about this is I kind of think even having the numbers might be too busy. So what I would even do is go here and say, you know what? I don't need sum of sales there. I just need it on my detail. Because then when I hover over, I get to see the number. And the color of the graph is what's telling me everything I need to know, right? See what I'm doing here? I'm providing the same information in less space, right? And that makes this more valuable, or as valuable, and I can make it smaller and smaller and still get that information, right? So to answer your question, use your space wisely. Don't overdo it. But if you are going to put something in a space, make it as valuable as possible.
All right. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right. I really, I do want to apologize again for being late. We'll try not to do that next week. I think I can log in now pretty easily. And for last week, I hope that I helped get you kind of a better idea of how to clean up your data a little bit using prep. Certainly, if you have any questions, let us know, and we'll see what we can do to help you even further. Jessica, back to you.
Awesome. So thank you so very much. Again, thank you for your patience and good luck. If there's anything that you need, please do not hesitate. Just some really quick tips just to wrap up. And I believe that Professor Bowen has already asked the question about the visualization. The other tip that some of you have been reaching out on LinkedIn and things of that nature, that's the reason I was really excited about this workshop, is the story that you will tell with your data. However, don't forget that the reason why we wanted you to have this workshop with the dashboards is because, one, you have to get their attention first. The second piece is please present valuable information, things that will get them to think and to start to want to act on that information. So with that, we thank you very much. Thank you, Rain. Thank you, John. Thank you so much to NCAA and to Crossroads Classic Analytics. And thank you for the students and participants who have joined today to learn. So we appreciate you and we hope to see you soon.